we should get started. I am incredibly excited about this panel. This is Diverse Parties Slay, Inclusion in Tabletop Role-Playing Games. You can't blame me for that title, but I'm glad that you came anyway, despite the cheese factor. So my name is Elizabeth McLean. I'm the founder of Open the Gates Gaming. I am a white cishet woman who has, I don't know how long, past my shoulders blonde hair now. I don't look in a mirror enough. And glasses. I'm in my mid-30s. I am disabled. I'm autistic, and I have mobility aids with me and some other disabilities. I think that'll be relevant. I am moderating the panel today. I do want to introduce two people who aren't on stage very briefly. Kareem and Raphael work here and need a raise. We've also got Atlas taking pictures, but please don't worry, taking pictures of us. So we're not taking pictures of you. We will not do that and then post it places without your consent. But with that, I'm actually going to let our panelists introduce themselves. So let's start with you, Chris.
Hello, my name is Chris Campo-Bowen. I am the lead storyteller, which is an interesting title for Open the Gates Gaming. My day job, I'm actually a college professor. I teach music history classes. I am a Latino man in my late 30s, about to be in my late 30s on Monday. And let's see, I am queer, I am liminally disabled, I don't know, it's complicated. And I don't know, what else should I say?
You like D&D?
I do like D&D a lot. And yeah, I write adventures. I'm a forever DM, it turns out. I found that out about myself. And yeah, I think that's me.
Yeah. We'll definitely learn more. How about Frank?
Hello, everybody. I am Frank Fonseca Jr. I am a GM in residence for the Dots RPG project. I'm a RPG enthusiast. I'm Latino. I'm queer. I have ADHD. I suspect I'm on the spectrum, but can't get that verified because I live in America. Yeah, I love being on panels and talking about games. And we're going to talk to you about our experiences today being marginalized in the gaming space.
Awesome, thank you. And now someone with many names and many hats. Charm, Nix, however you'd like to introduce yourself, actually.
Whatever works for today. Hello, everyone. I am Charm, at Charm Foolery, literally everything, which is where charm comes from. I am a cosplayer, I am a streamer, and I am what I like to call a tabletop content mercenary. If there is something to do, it always gets a laugh. If there's something to do in tabletop games, I either have done it, want to do it, have researched it extensively, or am about to do it. I mainly do a lot of AP production as well as AP performances to this day. And otherwise, you can catch me with newer cosplays later next year. I do a lot of big projects, so they're a little slow, but when they happen, they're huge, and I'm looking forward to a lot of that. And for the sake of description, I am what many would consider a black woman, though I myself am more of a ephemeral blob in my mind, perhaps with boobs. I'm a really hot blob in my mind. Let's just say that, okay? I've got glasses, I'm masked up for today, and having a good time.
Awesome, thank you so much. And last but not least, Dakota.
Hello, I'm Dakota. I use he, him pronouns. I am biracial. I have glasses on. I'm currently wearing a hat with a little shark bite bit out of it. I am currently working with Open the Gates as a video editing assistant, but I also do a bunch of other little things here and there for them. In my kind of personal space, I am a quote-unquote professional GM. People pay me money to run games sometimes, and I also make video games sometimes, though I'm hoping to kind of get into some more TTRPG stuff, but that's me.
Thanks so much. Dakota, you're definitely downplaying it. That is Dakota's title, but that's probably what, like 10% of what we have to do? But awesome, thank you. So I want to start with the big picture question. Why is inclusion important at all in this space? And like to, Chris, if you're comfortable leading us off.
Sure. So when kind of we were thinking about this panel, this was the first big question we had is, why do we talk about inclusion, why do we care about inclusion? And I think at its most basic level, we care about inclusion because having people with different backgrounds, different identities, different ways of being in the world at your table makes the game more fun. Like, you have different perspectives, you have different ideas, you have people show up in different ways, and that ultimately I think leads to a better game no matter what kind of game you're playing. If I put on my incorrigible academic hat for a second, there's a person out there, a guy named Paulo Freire, who wrote a book called Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And this is a really fabulous book about how critical education works. And Freire talks a lot about the power of education as a mode of resisting dehumanization, as a way of making people more human. And I think that this is applicable, and not to be too utopian about it, but I think this is applicable in certain ways to TTRPGs and to other kinds of games, that showing up as yourself, playing a game with other people, being accepted for who you are, however you show up in the world, is a way of being more human, is a way of resisting dehumanizing impulses that are increasingly common in our current fascist environment in this country. And so, not to put too much fine point on it, but it really is a way of resisting oppression and resisting these forces that want to say you are less than a full person because you are X, Y, or Z, or some combination thereof. So yeah, so it's only going to get more political from here. So
yeah, just starting off the top. I left out that I'm also an assistant professor of musicology and director of disability studies at Virginia Tech. Trying to be chill. This is hey. Good. We'll report that back, and we'll get more grants. But no, I have found what you're saying kind of it resonates with me with the disability community, because we've been building cognitive access tools so people can play D&D without changing the rules of the game and start telling their stories through that lens, and that does seem to do something. Like if you've been playing a game with someone, telling a story together, it's harder to then walk away and then think of them as partially human, but you're also letting yourself step into different things. But I know this is really complex too, because none of us have just one identity, and this notion of like having personas, stepping into a character, I think it has some real world analogs. Dakota, is that something you're comfortable sharing about?
Yeah. So I have a little bit of a story to tell about inclusion and also kind of representation as a whole. So I'm going to talk about something called a white sona. When I was a young lad, I kind of looked around at the spaces that I wanted to be a part of, and like role-playing games, anime, all that nerd stuff that we all love. And I saw that the people there didn't really look like me. And they were all white. Most of them were white. It's kind of not only the people kind of running the show and doing that stuff, but also the characters that are represented in all sorts of forms of media. And so there is a saying that it is a canon event for every black artist or person of color artist to have a white sona, because when you look around and you see that the characters and the people don't necessarily fit your skin tone, you tend to start drawing yourself as a white person. I've eventually learned to love myself and how I am. But it took getting there. And I think that's part of why inclusion and kind of representation as a whole is really important.
just because everyone is giving slightly confused glances. I'm gonna back this up as someone who has a background in digital painting and was studying art for a very long time and also was influenced by character designs. I represented myself as a redheaded white girl with freckles and brown eyes for the longest time. Literally, I think maybe 20 years ago I stopped doing that. I'm 35. Like, it's just a thing. Like, if you don't see yourself, it's hard to imagine what yourself even looks like. It's hard to translate it, especially from an art perspective, using references. What references did we have for natural hair 20 to 30 years ago? Other than photos, which may or may not even be good photos. A lot of them were just from National Geographic, right? Like, we didn't have the options that we do now because people have explored those things that are so much more clearly these days. And so there's definitely, like, especially in this time period. Nowadays it's a little bit less, but definitely from our youth, my youth, and I'm sure many people here, we didn't have that. We didn't have even the reference material to even try. So that's what we did.
So I think what I'm hearing is that some of the representational issues in terms of who can access tabletop gaming, who is playing, it's not just stopping like at the table or over the table, if we try to think of it that way, that there's an in-universe component here too. In representation, like in the games, I guess that could be an interesting thing. Frank, you run Avatar: The Last Airbender, right? Or a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse, all of Powered by the Apocalypse. But yeah, I'm really curious about this one because I've only tried to run it for small children, which was a choice. But I don't have experience with Powered by the Apocalypse either.
That sure is a choice. That was
Yeah.
brave of you. I'm proud that you tried. Yeah, I love PBTA games. I've run Avatar Legends quite a few times. And this is less of a solution to this story, but it's a thing that happened that made me think of an interesting question. I was running a one-shot for a friend and some of their friends that I didn't initially know. And long story short, everybody seemed okay getting into the setting, except for one player, ultimately refused to play an Asian character. And if you know anything about the Avatar Legends universe, right, it's all sort of based on Asian and Pacific Islander mythology, kind of, right? It's like this pan-Asian setting. And this player insisted on playing a redheaded white, basically an elf character from their D&D games translated into the Avatar. Now, because it was a one-shot, I didn't feel like that particular fight was worth my time to have a long discussion about it, but if it was a campaign, I probably would have refused that. I said, well, it sounds like you maybe are not comfortable with what we're going to explore in this setting, and that's the purpose of Lines of Veils, right? We're having this discussion before it's set up. And my thinking about it is, the idea of a pan-Asian setting, right, I think is kind of radically inclusive, right? It's radically representational. And there is, I don't think this person meant wrong, but there is some audacity to say, I'm going to reject that this whole setting is meant to represent Asian mythology and Asian culture in a fictional space, and I'm going to insert just a culture that makes me comfortable, but it's not really seen anywhere in this setting. You know, I think a wider discussion could be had as well. Does a fictional setting matter more than a human being's feelings? I think no. But again, there's something. I think you reach a point where you have to realize not every game is for you, and sometimes just sit this one out, right? And if you're not bought in, pass, play something different.
I'd like to add on to that because there's an aspect of the story that I think a lot of people forget when it comes to trying to insert something that may or may not fit, and it's accepting the consequences. There's an aspect of like a lot of people pushing certain identities that may or may not exist in a setting, or wanting to play something that may or may not exist in a setting, and not being willing to accept that if you're playing it for a very deep story, for example, that maybe other characters might point that out, and being okay with it being pointed out. Not necessarily, I'm not saying be racist in your games, but I am saying that like, if a white guy shows up to the black city, like, that's mainly black people, maybe there will be a question of, hey, what are you, is everything good? How are you? Why are you here? What's going on? Like, and that's okay to have that conversation, but you need to be willing to have the conversation. You can't insert something that quote unquote isn't supposed to be there, quotes around that, serious quotes, heaviest quotes, and then not accept that maybe you need to have the conversation. Have the conversation. If you're gonna be brave enough to reject something, you also need to be brave enough to be rejected. Sorry, I'm a hot taker. I get mad at people in these sorts of things where I'm just kind of like, girl, if you want to do this, you need to deal with the fact that I may question you about it, and I'm gonna be direct.
Never apologize for that.
No, this is definitely hot take central today. But no, I'm really curious about this. Because as a white person, I could see someone's gut reaction being like, oh my gosh, this might be yellow face if I do it. Which is weird in a game when it's like orcs and elves and things anyway. But
If they can tell me that I can't be in their D&D game as a black girl, then they cannot fight me back when I look at them and go, so why you white in my Asian game? Sorry. It's not fair. Disrespect.
yeah, and these conversations are so complicated. Like I do really appreciate how frequently I'm seeing safety tools and mechanics, things like lines and veils being used. But I feel like, and I do want to preface this with like, there have to be two different standards for a one shot with people you don't really know that well, and campaigns and things that are going on longer. But I don't know. I mean, when I get asked, for example, like, do you want ableism in this game? Yes or no? Or like, you know, green, yellow, red light. I have no idea what to do with that.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I'm really curious when you're talking about having this conversation.
Yeah.
Charm, like what do you think that could look like? Or
So I think a lot of that really looks like having the deeper stage of that conversation, which is, what do you mean by putting ableism in the game? So if you see ableism on a list of things that may or may not be allowed, and you're trying to decide what you're thinking about it, are we going up against ableism? Or are we choosing to be ableist at our players or between players, right? Is this something that we plan on exploring and growing from and experiencing and using as a story element as well as a character growth moment? Or are we just using it because it sounds like fun to be mean to the disabled kid, which is fucked up, by the way. Do not do that. So, and that's the main difference, and I think when you get those lists of things on lines and veils, that's the conversation you really need to be having, of just like, instead of saying no colonialism, no racism, no fat phobia, no all of these things, you need to have the conversation of, is this something we are contending with and fighting against? Is this something we are just discussing? Is it just a background element? Is it something we're accepting? Like, how are we treating this subject matter? Because that's the real key. Because there are great stories that are told around all of the isms that we don't like to talk about. I mean, Star Wars, for those of you who like Star Wars, it's fascism, right? Like, we're fighting fascism. So if you put on your line and veil in a Star Wars game that you don't want to deal with fascism, are you saying that you don't want to play fascist? Are you saying that you all really want to be super cool Empire guys? And is that where we're going? Or are you saying that you want to like experience it and then use it as a storytelling tool to move forward, like in an example of something like more like the Star Wars shows, right? Like, so there's ways to include negative things and grow from them that I think a lot of people forget about when they're trying to be as beautifully inclusive as possible. They do that thing where they erase the problem of the thing and instead kind of makes it feel like they're just like patting us on the head going, wow, you're so good for being brown today. And it's just like, wow, great, cool, that's not my lived experience and I hate this, thank you.
I'll say too, like, it's interesting with, we were talking about with kind of having representation in games and, you know, playing a character, a role, something that is not your own identity. And I think there's a lot of worry these days about, like, I don't want to do it wrong, right? So like a lot of this kind of energy of, we're not going to do this is like, I don't want to get it wrong, I don't want to accidentally be fascist, or whatever, or epicurism.
Oops,
but I
did a fashion.
increasingly common these days, unfortunately. But I will say, like, when we're doing these things, I think this is also part of the larger, like, you know, session zero-ish conversation of, you know, how are we doing this? What are we doing this for? Can we make space for each other to maybe take on these things we might not be comfortable with, but then not be immediately like foreclose all possibility of repair, right? If we screw something up,
Yeah.
right? Like, there has to be we have to presume good intent, and again, that's only something you can do through discussion of understanding the people you're with. This is a very different thing than if you show up at a con and do a one-shot, like that's a lot harder to figure out, like what are we doing? So maybe, yeah, don't do the fascism. But in this sense, I think, yeah, we have to enable a reparative approach for when we screw up or when there are issues in terms of representation or, identity, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Open communication is really, really important in
Yes.
these sorts of moments where it's like, it's very easy to accidentally overstep or accidentally understep. One of my really great examples is me personally as a player. I like playing things that are othered, but not everybody likes that. Like, I enjoy going up against whatever social structure there is and fighting back. So when someone is like, hey, I don't want to do that, then I have to have that conversation. I have to be willing to have the conversation and also be willing to adjust for their comfort as well as my own and see how I can make that fit comfortably in the group. And that conversation is really, really, really important. Please do not skip over it.
I do want to jump in with just maybe one last thing. I don't know. We'll see. On the topic of disabilities within what we're talking about, right? I think disabilities is another thing that gets wallpapered over, right? Systems that tend to have it represent that are all treated as like a trade buy-off, right? If you take this disability, you'll get these bonus points. Gross, miss me with that. It's like, no, I'm not playing your stupid game. I would much rather, if you're gonna have a character with a disability, let that disability complicate their life. You can give them, not give them, but you can, show them how that character navigates their life with that disability. Don't give me points to make the disability invisible, right? That's super sus. And I think that belongs in your pregame conversation too, right? If we're going to tackle some difficult topics in our fiction, then let's tackle them, let's be honest about them. But be ready at the outset. And if you have that session zero conversation, it's like, I'm really not ready to handle this, right? I don't want my disability to come up in this game because it weighs on me in my real life. Valid, for real. But then don't play that game, right? Don't pretzel that game into a shape that is comfortable for you if everybody else wants to deal with kind of a tough topic.
Which I feel like gets back to sometimes when I'm on the, I see lines and veils and someone's marked off ableism, it turns into like I can't show up as a disabled character because like it's gonna come up, like it's gonna be there, or even if it's a success story, right? Like I don't know, it feels like it's shutting down an ability to tell a story. But I'm kind of curious how this interacts with, like we're definitely focusing more on kind of the home game experience with the longer term things. What does this look like for actual play? Like, is the conversation different for actual play when it comes to representing an identity that's very different than yours? Or I'm thinking especially of like, white people playing characters of color, like that kind of dynamic, but really any direction there.
Ooh, I have so many opinions. The opinions.
And you're here because we want to hear
I
this.
know. So in actual plays, it depends on the group. It depends on what the group is trying to accomplish, and it depends on what the group thinks is important to their story, of course. So sometimes you end up with a lines and veils list that marks off a lot of challenges, but at the same time you have a show describing itself as dealing with the struggles of being a stranger in a strange place, but then they mark off all the isms that come with being a stranger in a strange place. Unfortunately, that's just kind of how it works. People don't know you, they're probably gonna ask questions that are inappropriate, right? I know if I go to Japan, someone may look at my hair and go, that's interesting, and that's okay. They're learning, they don't know you. And that does come up sometimes with actual play where like the goal kind of misaligns with things that they're trying not to push you about. And the same goes with like horrible drama. Sometimes there's drama and we're trying to fabricate something really important and really intense, but because we dodged all the nasty things we could talk about, it becomes kind of like petty drama. It becomes more of like, it becomes a CW show, for lack of a better description. So there's that aspect when it comes to APs, and I think the conversations are getting deeper and more intense when it comes to lines and veils, and I'm watching every time I get on a new show, the lines and veils list gets longer and more impactful, more deep, more specific, and that is lovely. At the same time, if you are doing a show and you have one of those really deep, wonderful lines and veils lists, and everyone marks off all their beautiful information about what they do and don't want to see, you still need to talk about it. Because I think that's really the key that sometimes gets missed and why those things get kind of glossed over, because like just reading off the list to each other and going, cool, is everyone cool with not touching this? And then thumbs upping it, not as useful as going, how are we cool with this? How aren't we cool with this? Where does this fit in our story, where doesn't it? And I think those are the big ones when it comes to actual play to me, so far in my experiences. The other thing I think is it feels like we are trying really hard to find the actual play niche that is good for everyone. And unfortunately, there will never be anything good for everyone. You can only do your best. Some stories you want to tell to the public will not resonate with the public, especially when dealing with marginalized identities, because that's what they are, they're marginalized identities. To an extent, only so many people are going to look at us, and we can only force ourselves down so many people's throats. So tell the story you want to tell and have those hard, deep conversations with the people you need to have them with for your show. Don't avoid them. Just accept that you're not going to see everybody, and that's okay. It's totally okay.
I wonder, this makes me think too, I know we were chatting about this at one point when we were kind of prepping for the panel. We were talking about the idea of kind of representation generally, right? Like, you know, who do we see on screen? Who is at our table? And I think there's a lot of dimensions to this question, right? Like representation is obviously necessary, right? Like we need to see different people, different ways of being in the world, all that kind of stuff, but it is of course not sufficient, right? You can't just stop at, here's a person of color, right? Like, I mean, automatically tokenism, right? Bad. So, but it goes beyond that too, in that it shouldn't also just be representation of one particular kind of story, right? Like we need to be inclusive about the kinds of stories we tell about people, and they need to be about people, not just, you know, a one-dimensional character that fulfills this thing in this niche that we need because we want our show to do X, Y, Z, for example. And so I think like we need to be okay, and this gets to your point, Elizabeth, as well. I think about representations of, you know, not necessarily negative, but like, you know, an anti-hero rather than a hero, right? Like other ways of telling the story that maybe, you know, like Latino people are human too, right? Like, you know, there are a lot of them voted for Trump, whoops. Yeah, it's weird. And so, yeah, it is, I think it's tricky, right? Like we want to have all these different things, but know that, right, like not everybody this is not for everybody. But it's important to always go beyond merely representation, I think.
Yeah, you can't just make your one shopkeeper brown. Sorry.
Don't apologize for your contributions.
I'm just throwing it out there. You also can't, you know, ignore the fact that if your player has a family and they've chosen to make their family have any sort of identity, like you can't just ignore it and be like, well, I guess I'm never going to talk about their family. Bitch, their family exists. Shut up, show their family. Like, it's fine. The best way I can describe it, I'd rather you get the representation slightly wrong and have the conversation with the person you are representing and talking to later. Or in the moment. You can pause if you're at home. You can pause in an actual play too, you know? There's this really handy thing a lot of us use, and it's called oops, technical difficulties. Like, take the moment, it's okay. I'd rather you get it wrong and try, and then be corrected, and course correct for the future, than do absolutely nothing and actually do everyone no favors.
Well, that reminds me of like, so I'm again coming from the disability angle, and this idea of disability justice of moving together, which is also very tied into reparative justice. I mean, for us, accessibility is not a checklist. It's not like, oh, we did it. Oh, we universal designed something. Like the reality is, accessibility is a way of moving through the world. It's a process. It's an approach. It never ends. You never get it right. And it sounds like, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I would love to learn this. But is inclusion kind of similar, where it's a matter of like being vulnerable, continuing to grow, moving together in community instead of being so scared as an individual? Am I right or am I wrong in this moment?
Oh, 100%. 100%. Everything is a conversation. Everything you do as an adult human is a conversation. Even as a child human, let me rephrase that. Everything you do as a human is a fucking conversation. And if you're not willing to have the conversation, go away. Like, that's just the way it is. You can't survive being human amongst other humans without talking to other humans. Or communicating with other humans is actually what I'm going to rephrase that, because there are many ways to communicate that are not talking. And it's unfair to yourself and anyone you represent, any community you're part of, anyone you try to talk to not be willing to open up.
I'm just like letting that sink in. But I am curious, we've talked a little bit about playing games, you know, from the perspective of the difference between home games, actual play, conventions. What about like the writing piece? Because some of you are not just talented players, performers, DMs, GMs, but also kind of creating things. I also just feel weird being like, and now I'm calling on my student Dakota. But now I'm calling on my student Dakota. but I know that
I'll make it not weird. Dakota, speak the fuck up.
I love that. I love this approach, but I also feel like I probably shouldn't say it. Personally, there's
Sorry, the panel is listed as 13 plus, so.
no, I just meant me with the power dynamic. But no, I'm curious because you mentioned being a professional DM. You run a lot of stuff, but you write things too, right?
Yes. So yeah, most of the stuff that I GM or DM for, I completely write myself. I write my own adventures, campaign settings, that sort of thing. And I, kind of harkening back to inclusion, found that there are so many other places that fantasy can be set that isn't just Western Europe. I mean, don't get me wrong, love Western Europe fantasy, but also, you can have too much of a good thing. And I think it's important and good and fun to explore other places and other forms of fantasy. And so I part of my effort to do that, I guess, is through this campaign setting that I'm currently running as part of one of my professionally run games, and it's kind of loosely based in like voodoo and the voodoo religion and culture, so like Haitian voodoo, New Orleans, Louisiana, just African diaspora kind of religions like that. Yeah, I think it's something that it's a place in an adventure that I think should be told. Although, like, I personally I didn't grow up like around like practitioners of voodoo or anything like that. So I sometimes think to myself, who am I to be telling this story? Who am I to be writing this adventure or this campaign setting? Like, I've done my research, but I'm not as intimately connected with it as I feel like I could be. So that's just something that I've kind of been thinking about when it comes to that.
So I think about this a lot too, and there is certainly an aspect here of, if not you, then who, right? We have such a, I think, lack of these different kinds of stories because inclusion is not just representation, it's not just people, it is kinds of stories, it is mythologies, it is tales, it is cosmologies, right? It is ways of organizing the universe. Different cultures across all of human history have had very different ways of conceptualizing that. And yet in many of the games that we play, especially in high fantasy, which is kind of one of the dominant forms, it is very much restricted to like, here's like roughly 200 years of European history in a very particular part of Europe, and that's the basis for like 90% of it. But then, like, okay, great, let's do something else. That move, that's the hard thing, right? You have to figure out what story am I going to tell? What setting do I want to evoke? And there are, ethical decisions to be made there, right? Like you should not make something that you have perhaps zero connection to, or if you do, you have to be very, very careful about how you do it, who you talk to, what the stakes are, who benefits, right? Always with these conversations about things like appropriation, the ultimate thing is, and this was your phrase, I believe, follow the money, right?
Oh yeah, because look, the music history teachers, it's working. Because we talk a lot about cultural appropriation in music, and I think this also goes back to the idea of like, is it yellow face for me to play an Asian character in Avatar: The Last Airbender as an RPG? Cultural appropriation is not just participating in another culture. It's doing so in a way where you are benefiting financially and or shutting another culture off from the access to it. There is a power dynamic thing happening. You are taking something, and a lot of times it does turn into kind of a monetization type setting. So there is definitely like kind of an attitude perspective there, I think.
Yeah, and I think like one thing I'll share that happened yesterday. I was running a game in the PTI, so which already starts to change perhaps somewhat how these games can go. Because it is a space dedicated to thinking about things like including people from underrepresented backgrounds, And I was running a game that I set in my kind of homebrew setting, which is based on a variety of different Mesoamerican cultures. This particular adventure was based in an area that is connected to the Nahuas of Western El Salvador. My family is from there. I personally do not have, so far as I'm aware, any kind of, I certainly wasn't raised in community with the few indigenous folks that are left. I was not raised there, I was born in the States. But I feel a connection to this because of my heritage, and so I have tried to explore this as much as I can. I've done a lot of reading, I've done a lot of research, I'm trying to learn this indigenous language, Nahuatl. But that's still not, I'm still not from there. So there is a kind of leap that I think has to happen. I hope I'm doing it ethically. I'd like to think I am. But the thing I was going to say is, with this game, this story that I wanted to share with people, I told them the kind of basis of this world and what the stories were, and they all then wanted to create characters that were somehow connected to this world. And I was like, hell yeah, let's go. What do you want to do? One person wanted to be like a volcano priestess. From this land of jungles and volcanoes based on Central America. And I was like, yes. And I think this was, for me, a kind of an inclusion win in the sense of people were engaging with, who were, at least two of these people were, from what I can tell, white people. And they, I ran the game bilingually, like I spoke some Spanish, and I said at the beginning, like, look, this is bilingual, there will be some other languages, and that's okay if you don't speak them, but they all did, and they all wanted to engage in that way. And I felt like I was able to share this story with people that were invested and that wanted to explore it. And I felt like I could guide them in my small way of like, here's just a different way, or a different story, a different setting. And so that felt good. But getting to that place can be tricky. It requires stepping out of one's comfort zone. Because for a long time, I just ran, like, random old 5e, here's some dragons, here's some knights, etc. But then I kind of got bored of that, so I wanted to do other things.
I mean, you can never get bored of owlbears, but
I can only speak for me.
That's true.
Yeah,
No,
I wanted to jump in on
oh, yeah,
this real
please
quick,
do.
if I could, just to speak to like Dakota's implied question of, right, who am I, right? Who gets to tell these stories? And I mean, I think it's tough when you don't see a culture or an ethnicity or, right, something that you see in the world not represented in your fiction, in your fantasies, that, well, where do you turn to? If nobody's doing this, I think it is a brave decision to decide, let me try it. But you do have a responsibility to that culture, right, or that religion in this case, to represent it well, right? Treat it with respect, do your due diligence, right? Do some reading. If you can afford to have a consultant, pay them well. Be on the lookout for experts. And look, I think it would be the dream to have somebody from that culture that you're emulating or representative of that religion to approach you and say, thank you so much for doing this, I feel seen. Hopefully that's the goal, but it's also a very real possibility that somebody from that, that culture is going to approach you and say, why did you do this? Right? How dare you take this leap? And you have to be willing to sit with that criticism if that happens. And hopefully you will have the ability to turn that conversation into A, an apology, and then B, asking, enlisting that person. It's I did my best. I'm sorry my best wasn't good enough. What could I do better? Who would you recommend that I turn to get the answers that I need? And is there someone from that culture who maybe could be elevated to take this on? Right? I wasn't the right person, but I really would love to see this represented. Be willing to do that work, I think. And I mean, it sounds to me like you are, but I'd rather see more representation than less. And it speaks to, I think, Nix's point is be willing to have the hard conversations.
That's, yeah, everything, all of that. that was absolutely everything. I think, because I see some other folks that look as pale as me in the crowd, I think one metric that's interesting here is am I making space for other people, or am I taking up space from other people? That idea of, number one, no one is being nearly as strict about how we handle European fantasy and European history as y'all are being expected to do. So I want to acknowledge this double standard, and we need to be paying attention to it, and potentially stepping in and going this is a fantasy world, please. This is a Wendy's, But, I'm sorry, I'm autistic, and sometimes it just, yeah, okay. But I do think there is a moment here where we have to give each other grace. We can presume best intent. If people prove otherwise and that they're bad actors, we have mechanisms for that. Not every aspect of us trying to hold people accountable is bad, but paying attention to, are we kind of punching up metaphorically? Are we banding together because someone has power, or are we kind of just punching each other, punching down? Those conversations matter a lot. That said, I know we want to be in conversation with our attendees. So I want to give y'all, is there anything you'd like to say before we open it up? I have some directions before we get to questions, but.
I have one last thing I wanted to say, which was, I think what has just been said is very important, and it's something that I, personally really resonate with. The kind of, I am doing my best, right? Doing a lot of research on this stuff, and really trying my best to kind of represent it in a way I would love to. I have found that when I provide this setting that isn't just white-centered Europe, that I get a more diverse table. When I'm presenting it, hey, this is something different. I get a more inclusive, a more diverse table as well, and I think that's part of how you can maybe get some of those diverse perspectives in the first place.
I love when you speak up, Dakota. Every single time. Absolutely, because that is one of the questions we get most, right? Is how do I make my table more inclusive? It's what stories are you telling?
Yeah, I would say in terms of kind of things that are actionable, go to the library, go to a bookstore, find a book about the mythology of a non-Western culture. Read it, see, or listen to it. Just find something, right? That's you're not familiar with. I think that sort of thing. And again, yeah, I guess I'm plugging the kind of more meta level of it in the sense of different ways of thinking about the world or about the universe. That is really, I think, valuable to be able to think in different ways about the ways that we tell stories, where we set these stories of fantasy and or heroism and or anti-heroism, right? So yes, go buy books and read them, or go to the library and get books and read them, I think is my advice.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that. Actionable is a word that I like, and I think my hope, certainly for this panel, is that everyone in the audience is compelled to take action on this idea when you go home. So I'm going to challenge all of you in the next 100 days, right? Use your winter and apply some of what you've heard or what we've discussed, right? Make your table more diverse, make your games more diverse, hire a marginalized professional GM, like, pay them for their expertise. If your table looks homogenized, fix that, right? If your friend group outside of gaming looks homogenized, fix that first, right? Make your gaming tables tend to mimic your real life relationships. So if your games look one note, there's another problem going on. And if you live in a geographically sort of culturally homogenous area, play games online, right? Diversify your relationships, and your games will diversify. So, I mean, look, I believe in you. You can do it. You've got 100 days. It's easy, baby steps. And I think now more than ever, in our current political climate, the world needs your art. RPGs are art. Go do it.
If I see any of you next year at PAX Unplugged and you're like, oh, my table's so white and my story's so white, I will throw hands. There's 1,000,001 panels, like, speak not of the devil Google, but Google it. It's not hard, I promise. Research starts somewhere, and even start at Wikipedia, I don't care, but research starts somewhere. Have the respect for the thing you love enough to learn about it. If you enjoy something so much, you should at least owe it a moment to do the research to understand it more deeply. If you love anime, you should take a moment to understand and appreciate Japanese culture, right? You can't love things in a box, because that's not loving it, that's putting it in a catalog. It's very different.
So in summary, Chris believes you can learn. Frank believes in you. And Charm is going to hold you accountable.
Sure will. I will put you on blast.
Wait, can I also do a bill?
And also you can pay Dakota to.
I should do that. I'm going to be really annoying professor and also say, yes, go to Wikipedia, but then scroll all the way to the bottom and look at the bibliography.
Yes.
Here's bibliography mine.
Please, sources, related articles, all of the things. Please, God, JSTOR is free now. Go use it.
Yeah.
Also, Wikipedia, the vast majority of Wikipedia is written and edited by white men, specifically. And it's something you need to know. There's actual projects about trying to diversify who contributes to Wikipedia. It can be really useful, but yeah, check your sources.
Also,
go ahead.
speaking of check your sources, if any of you approach me and tell me you're going to ask ChatGPT or Grok or anything else,
Absolutely.
I will throw hands so fast.
Well,
Get off my tongue.
this just descended into chaos. I really don't know how good of a job
I
I
will
was
tell
doing.
PAX security to get rid of you. Do your research and talk to humans.
Love your brain. Do not let it atrophy.
Yes, they're writing rule number 7 right in front of you.
Yes.
You saw it here first.
Do not Call of Duty Black Ops 7 your campaign with AI writing into whatever setting or world or story you are building, please. You owe it to yourself.
This is amazing. So we have just over 10 minutes. We would love to chat with you. We would love to hear what's on your mind, but please, because we have limited time, we're looking for questions only. So if you're interested in giving us some comments or sharing anecdotes or connecting, if you can send that to us in emails or by socials, that would be great. But we would love some questions.
Challenge me.
I'm sorry, I should
If you
explain.
can. If you cannot, please let us know, and we will either project or bring the microphone to you. Huh?
I'll bring it to them.
Alice will bring you a microphone. Hit us. Oh, is it on? It's okay.
It doesn't work.
Hi.
Hello. Thank you.
I work at the library with a bunch of kids. How do you, I don't know, not right or wrong, but some kids are on various sexuality spectrums, and they'll play that character. And then their friends may want to play similar or something like that, and not in a mean way. they want to be respectful, but they're like, I want to explore this in this character as well, and we can't say they're definitely exploring something in themselves, so I can't say yes or no.
Right.
But how to maybe approach that? Is that just they're kids? It's fine. See what happens because everyone is. Well, I already know they're playing nice. They're not.
I go with the let them policy in that regard personally, because I caution against anyone trying to, what's the words I want to look for here? I'm going to use my bad words to get to the good words. That's the way I like to put this. I don't think it's correct to tell them they can't play something they don't identify with, or that, you know, they're incorrect for exploring something that they may or may not identify or understand deeply, because this is their opportunity to get that understanding. This is just one avenue for them to acquire understanding for something they may or may not be into, or something they may find they love, right? This is their chance to explore safely, and you get to help them explore safely. And honestly, that's such an honor that you have kids who are willing to trust you with that exploration, and believe that you can provide an experience for them that can help them understand the world a little bit better.
They don't trust me. They just assume
I
I
mean,
get it.
that's a level of trust, whether or not we talk about it the same way, but it is honest. That's one of the greatest things I think anyone can ask for, is to have someone say, hey, I don't know what this is, but I really want to try it, but I hope that you'll support me.
How do you feel that applies to adults?
Oh, absolutely. I think that super applies to adults. I think more adults get a little caught up in thinking that they've finished defining themselves after they finished high school, and need to understand that they can adjust and learn as well, and they should also be open to that level of respecting other identities and things they want to explore enough to say, hey, I don't know, but I would like to explore that with you.
I'd like to jump in on that real quick if I could. Let them, I echo your sentiments, right? Let them try to explore that. When it comes to kids, I think it's pretty easy to detect someone who's being disingenuous, right? And tell them to knock that shit off if you sniff that in the air. But like, as someone whose arc to their queerness was the over-enthusiastic straight friend, sometimes people just don't understand what's going on in their brains until they have a chance to act that stuff out in a safe fictional space. And like playing Monster Hearts and having my wolf character fall in gay love with the vampire character at the table without my input was a religious world-shaping experience for me. So let them try that stuff.
Getting to be hella gay in Bioware games was mind-blowing for me. Go for it.
I'm gonna jump in kind of right where you just were, Frank. Thank you. I'm glad you were there. I work in experiential trauma therapy. I'm a social work student, and I have a fascination with the explosion in TTRPGs and mental health services and stuff. I'm sure some of you have been exposed to that. Some of you might know that like a lot of the energy in that space is going towards things like skills training and like getting people geared up to be basically better members of the workforce, or whatever. Pretty far away from the kinds of experiences of like liberation, understanding, deepness. And so in the name of inclusion, we're seeing.
I'm so sorry, I'm wiggling because I'm so excited by your question. This is
So that's it. What do you think?
No, oh my God, thank God. Who are you? I should have met you on. Yes. Sorry, my biggest pet peeve is when people try, well, there's a lot of them, honestly. One of them is when people try to take Dungeons and Dragons or games like it, give it to autistic children and think it's gonna make them less autistic. Like, I'm sorry, if anything, it's making the rest of y'all more autistic. So, like, number one, flawed premise. Number two, that's not the motherfucking point. Sorry, I got my one, but it's not the point, right? Like,
I love games as an opportunity for people to learn things about themselves and others, and therefore, in that regard, maybe qualify as some level of exposure therapy, or what term that would be more appropriate there. But at the end of the day, they are still a game.
well,
And you can't replace that with,
but what's so empowering about it?
yeah,
Yeah, is
like,
that you
I
are.
get it. Like, sometimes you want to tell a game about trauma. And someone at the table probably has some trauma that might be related to that, and therefore they're gonna explore it a little bit differently than somebody else. But that's not their replacement for their skills in dealing with their trauma at home.
Well, and I think the thing that's making me excited hearing this is I feel like letting people play a game together helps them learn to build community. And in many cases, therapy is about helping us get the tools we need to heal enough to find community, because community is the answer. And gaming is community, like gaming done right is community. So to take something that is inherently going to build community and confidence and help people figure out how they socialize and how they do these things, and then trying to say, oh no, I'm going to teach you how to do it differently. It's just, yeah. So no, I desperately want to run a study that is literally just letting autistic people play D&D to show, or any other TTRPG, to see if that's where the wellness benefits come from. Like, just strip the therapy out of it and see. But no, please email me later.
Yeah, we'll be in touch.
Not everything is an intervention, right?
Yeah, for real.
I have one last cautionary element to add to that.
You have 1 minute.
Okay. If you are not a therapist, or more specifically the therapists of the people in those games, don't immersion therapy anybody. Don't fucking do that.
Yes.
But if you're a professional in that field, cool. Explore that and give us some academic results.
Yes.
Oh yeah, because you absolutely can explore traumatic things. It's helped me with my PTSD. It's helped me. I did not know that I was a charisma caster. I thought I was just a barbarian until I started playing D&D and like learning these things about myself. It does have all those benefits, but often by like letting it happen.
Yeah. Hit us. Hey.
Okay, slightly advanced question. How have you all navigated kind of like intersectionality at the table? Hard example, say someone with an invisible disability wanting to play someone who is in a wheelchair, or the connection between the Asian community and the African American community with a shared love of kung fu movies and anime, and how being a marginalized person wanting to portray a different marginalized person.
We could do a whole panel on this alone.
Yeah.
Please reach out to me on Blue Sky. I would love to have this conversation with you at length. Someone smarter than me, try and answer this in 30 seconds.
I'm not smarter than you.
Oh, on the
We are
disability
all
front?
exceptionally smart.
Yeah, I would say on the disability front, let them, because
Yeah.
they may be exploring whether or not it's safe for them to use mobility aids. Like in general, most people with disabilities are not using the right equipment because the information out there is wrong, and I feel like let them explore things until it becomes a problem. If it's turning into a caricature, it's turning into like, I know, this is one of the problems with wheelchair simulations is people sit in a wheelchair all day and then they think they know things, so they stop listening to people who actually use wheelchairs. So like that's the point I think where it becomes bad, but just kind of exploring what this is like, I think that can be very, very healthy.
Yeah.
But I can't speak to the racial component.
I've lived both of those questions as characters in my own tabletop games at home, specifically. In fact, my forever DM/husband is in the front here, and he can attest to the fact that I actually had a character that I wanted to explore physical disability with, who I literally had her arm torn off, so I could have a character that didn't have that and experience that experience. And what we ended up doing was just making sure we did the research and we didn't treat it as a constant joke, right? Like, it's a lot of us with our respective traumas and issues love to have dark humor about it, which is okay, but there is a line that is very easy to cross when it becomes a caricature of someone who doesn't have something and rubbing it in, and it's a very delicate dance. It is doable though. I feel like we did a really good job and I learned a lot, and it was a place, and in my future when I eventually discovered I had my own physical disabilities, made me as a human go, my character had a prosthetic arm, and no, they could not do as many things as they wanted to, but it is okay that I now need a cane.
So we're at
Yeah.
1 minute, so Chris has one thought.
Yeah, I wanted to say I really love this question, in part because it gets at something that I think is really frustrating about being any kind of minoritized group and having identities that overlap, intersect in different ways, is that we are so often conditioned to pick one or the other in any given space. And I think it's really, really important to be able to let those things be combined, to have especially solidarity across different groups. And so having a situation where someone wants to explore a marginalized experience that is not their own, but they understand their own marginalization, that kind of role play, right, is what allows people to build solidarity and to understand each other better, right, which is the kind of community building that I think we need. So yeah, no, that.
In closing, solidarity forever, and also let's get Kareem and Raphael paid more at Convention Center. Thank you.